Norio Hayakawa is a man who probably knows more about Area 51 and the Dulce Base than just about anyone I can think of. Area 51 is this much mythologized place. And just like we talked about the Illuminati a few shows ago, Area 51 is a similar situation in that it occupies this grand space of real estate within the public psyche. And we project so many things upon it. So many movies and television shows have had it as a central portion of whatever they were doing. And so I don't think people really know that much about what Area 51 actually is and how it came about. And it's actually back in the news again. So I thought there was no better time than now to reach out to Norio Hayakawa and invite him to come on to the Electric Pyramid. Mr. Hayakawa, greetings.
Good evening, Mike. Thank you so much for having me on your show tonight.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and staying up late with us. I've listened to you for years now and watched your work and been friends with you on various social medias, but this is the first time I've ever gotten to speak with you, so I'm very, very happy about that.
Oh, it's my honor to be here tonight talking about two of my favorite subjects, namely, as you said, Area 51 in Nevada, and then also my other favorite subject, the allegation of an underground base in Dulce, New Mexico. And New Mexico is where I reside now. I have been living in New Mexico since 2008 after moving from Southern California. I retired in 2008, and now I am a resident of this amazing state, New Mexico, the fifth largest state in the Union, yet with a population of only 2 million in the entire state.
That's sparsely populated.
It is sparsely populated. That's why it's so ideal for the government to conduct any kind of military research, testing and development, And so I'm fortunate to be living in this land of enchantment, and that is the motto of New Mexico, and yes. It is indeed a land of enchantment in more ways than one.
It is indeed. I grew up in Texas, kind of towards West Texas, and I've spent some time in New Mexico. It is an absolutely beautiful state. And I think we're going to spend a portion of the second hour, or as long as you could say with us, talking about Dulce. And first, though, I want to kind of jump into Area 51 because since you were going to be on the show, I've been doing a little bit of extra homework on Area 51. And one of the things that I think a lot of people would be surprised about, Norio, and you can inform a lot of people tonight, because I want to get to the nuts and bolts of how Area 51 came about and the fact that there's actually a lot more information about Area 51 than I think most people actually believe exists.
That's right. There's a lot of public information on Area 51. In other words, people can get lots of information on the public domain. There's no dark secrets that people imagine about Area 51. And basically, Area 51 was just not classified, just a research, development, and testing facility in the middle of nowhere in 125 miles northwest of Las Vegas, Nevada. And, that was just an operating base conducted by the CIA in 1955, although it may have started earlier, a few years earlier than 1955. But officially it started in 1955, although some people allege that Area 51 actually started earlier than 1955. In other words, in the late 40s, perhaps 1947, 48, who knows. But it all started with a company called EG&G Corporation.
The infamous EG&G.
That's right. EG&G was established, believe it or not, in 1947, the very same year that many things were established. For example, the CIA and the Air Force and the NSA. These were very fascinating, and it seems like it wasn't a coincidence, but The fact is that EG&G was the first contractor to set a foot on Area 51. So that's the beginning of Area 51, and now, over the past 25 years, whatever, it has become the world's most open secret base.
Yes.
And it has become a social, cultural, and psychological phenomenon, far removed from the reality.
Agreed. Let me ask you this. I've been looking at this Wikimapia, which you can actually zero in on, and you can literally highlight some of the buildings and things. But I was looking at Groom Lake proper with the big X runways on it.
Yes.
And were those runways, were those the ones that were do you think they were built by EG&G in the 40s? I guess it's called 927R, but it's literally on the lake bed itself.
Oh, yeah, those, I'm sure, were created prior to the establishment of that test facility. So, in other words, they needed a few years of preparation before they constructed the official runways. But it's a dry lake area, so it's a perfect spot to create runways. I mean, using the very dry area.
Yeah,
Just like Edwards Air Force Base. It's based on the dry lake, Rogers Dry Lake in Edwards. So many of these, the runways are ideally built over dry lakes.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, if you've already got a perfectly flat surface out in the middle of nowhere, that's a great place to do it.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, one of the things that I was reading was that in 55, and this kind of plays into where I want to go with this tonight, that in 55, I guess this man, Clarence L. Kelly Johnson, he was the designer of the U-2 spy plane. He wanted a place to test these planes, and he reached out to some folks, and that's when they decided that the Groom Lake airstrips, which I guess they'd used in the 40s, well, actually, that might be the place. Then they appropriated the money to do it out there in the late 50s. And so it really just started off as a place to design and experiment with the U-2 in private.
That's correct. That's why nobody considered that a classified facility until later. So it wasn't meant to be a top secret, classified facility at all in the beginning, because nobody knew about it, and they weren't worried about it.
Well, what's interesting to me is this man, Clarence L. Kelly Johnson, I guess he worked for Lockheed, which was Skunk Works. This guy, he obviously wielded a lot of power and was able to get what he needed, because essentially what I'm taking away from this is what we know of as Area 51 started off as a defense contractor's, not private base, but kind of personalized space to do their work for the government for which they were being paid.
Exactly. You're right.
It's remarkable.
It's remarkable, and look how it has grown,
Yes.
And many people have the wrong information that there's nothing going over there, but actually there's a lot of things going over there. You can verify that by the hundreds and hundreds of vehicles, employees' vehicles parked at Las Vegas EG&G terminal, which right now is managed by URS Corporation. But there are hundreds and hundreds of employees' vehicles at the particular section of Las Vegas McCarran Airport, which is occupied by that URS.
And
so
I'm sorry, who is URS?
URS is the main company that manages basically Area 51's defense contracting systems.
Okay.
And so it used to be EG&G. EG&G was actually incorporated into URS. So the best way to find out about URS is just go to the website called www.jt3.com. If you go to jt3.com, There's the URS symbol, and then there is the employment information
You're right. You're right.
and everything.
Yeah, I actually, okay, now it's jogging my memory because I actually went on there today. So are you saying that EG&G, while it still exists, they don't really call it EG&G, it's now under this URS moniker?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. So for the people, I mean, a lot of people listening to this show will know this, but in case we have some listeners who do not, these flights that take people into Area 51, many of them originate from Vegas and McCarran. And Norio, do some of those flights still originate from Burbank?
I believe some of the flights originate still from that area, but mainly from Edwards, California, Edwards Air Force Base, and probably some from other locations, maybe Utah and other parts of California, like, near Beale Air Force Base or others. So it's not just from Las Vegas, McCarran, it's from other places. They fly in various unmarked 737 jets, and then also smaller jets that they use. Mm-hmm. And so these are, this the so-called non-existent transit system.
Have you ever been able to speak to any former, I mean, I know they have signed a note that says they will not speak, but have you been lucky enough to possibly speak to any ex-employees of Area 51?
Well, there are many different types of employees. There are employees who work for defense contractors, and then there are other types of personnel, such as those who are hired as security personnel for the EG&G related operations and other companies themselves, in addition to the Air Force type of security. So, and then there are so many different types of employees that work. I've been in touch with actually a person who was one of those security people, and his name is Fred Dunham. Fred Dunham has been actively speaking out about some inconsistencies and other items about Area 51, and so I support people like Fred Dunham, who says there's a lot of wrong type of situations about Area 51 and our tax money and so on.
Norio, I want to talk about some of the buildings here as well, but that's literally the one thing I'm taking away from this. There's no aliens, but there is an orgy of money going down at Area 51. And I'm not sure. It just seems like I don't know what our return on investment is coming out of this, because what I'm taking away from this is that, well, let me back up. They're building some new hangars at Area 51. Tell me what you know about that.
Well, they're under construction. One particular one is a humongous hangar that's probably about 6 stories high, and it's almost like a department store, I mean, with a 6-story or 7-story high. It's a humongous building that's still under construction. It should be finished in a month or two, but you can see the cranes, and we have a photo taken by an anonymous contributor to a website, and he wants to remain anonymous, but he and his group climbed the mountain, which was about 26 miles away from Area 51 in August of this year, and took amazing panoramic photos.
I saw those.
That whole facility, and it's near the south end of the south ramp of Area 51. And this humongous hangar, or some kind of scoot and hide shed or storage or hangar, is about 4 times the size of the Hangar 18, which until now was the largest hangar at Groom Lake. And Hangar 18 is towards the end of the whole complex.
Yes.
Actually, middle, yeah.
Joe, did you drop these links into the chat room? Because I wanted to point out to our listeners, if they wanted to, there's an excellent, this thing, it's called Wikimapia. And I provided to Joe, if he hasn't had a chance to drop it in there, please do at some point, because you guys, you can literally click directly on the link and it will take you to an overhead view of Area 51, which you can then zoom in on quite a bit and hear and see with your own eyes what Norio and I are talking about. Norio, today when I was zooming in on some of these buildings, I know what your opinion is on the extraterrestrial aspect of this, and I agree with you. But one of the things that knocked me out today was when I was looking and zooming in on some of these buildings. Are you aware that there is a, God, where is it? A Majestic 12 building towards the top, towards the north end?
I wasn't aware in fact, I have never heard of a particular building called Majestic 12.
I know. I'm looking for it. I'm wondering if it's a gag, because I wrote it here in my notes and I'm trying to find it. Gosh, it's towards the north end, and it's one of the smaller buildings. But if you click on it, I think it says MJ12P.
Okay, well, I see there's a lot of different nomenclatures for the various structures, Hangar 6, 7, 4, old U2 hangars, and so on. But as far as, we know that, of course, there's a Hangar 18,
Yes.
which is the large hangar. There's a new base headquarters, and Hangar 18, right next to Hangar 18 is a Dyson's dock where they store old aircraft and so on, but I have not seen the
Yeah, I found it here. They call it the Majestic 12P building, and you have to zoom way deep in here. But they call it Majestic 12P, and I'm going to see if I can describe where I saw it.
I'm not surprised about it.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's just a rectangular building. It's beside the Range BE office and the Scoot and Hide shelter. But that was another question I was going to ask you about. Explain to our audience what these Scoot and Hide buildings, what they are and what purpose they serve.
Well, basically, it's about concealing whatever aircraft they don't want anybody seeing, from the satellites. So what they do is they create these huge hangars and the doors to move these objects inside while the satellite, maybe Russian satellite or other satellites, are going over, And so they are called a Scoot and Hide, but some of them are regular hangars. Some of them, others are just a storage, very flexible storage. And these are much needed because they can hide anything. And especially these days where people can actually see with powerful binoculars, even from 26 miles away, they can see things on the runway. So it's common sense that they built these things. Now, of course, they are using tongue-in-cheek to describe some official buildings. For example, everybody knows about Hangar 18. It was a rumor that Hangar 18 was in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they were storing some alien stuff and so on. But the government or the defense contractors, they sometimes use tongue-in-cheek type of thing to name things on purpose.
Norio, that's what I was wondering about this Majestic 12P building. I wonder if the building is obviously there, and that's what it says it's called. And I was wondering if that was a gag for people like us who are looking, thinking, "Oh my God, here's a Majestic 12 building."
You're probably right. There's no. That's why I'm saying is that they sometimes use these names and use the names that have been imagined by people on purpose. And that's why I'm saying, and I've been saying all these years, that there is a lot of deception and creation of
The
unrealistic.
mythology.
Yes, the mythology. You're right, the mythology.
No, I think you're right. I mean, listen, I want there to be some aliens out there because it's exciting. But the more I look at this and the more that I'm reading from hardcore aviation specialists, I think that what you're saying is correct. I think that they've concocted a lot of this as their cover story while these shadowy defense contractors just go to the bank over and over and over. Because one of the things I was reading today is this 2007 hangar that they built. That might be the Northrop Grumman hangar, and the new hangar that they're building at the south end is the Lockheed Boeing hangar. And what bothers me about that is that this is a top secret base that you and I can't get much information about. And yet there are these large defense contractors who really are calling the shots, and they are able to build these buildings and do business with our government, and we, the taxpayer, are paying for it. And obviously they know what's going on out there. They're the ones making the deals and making the buildings. So to me, it's the tail wagging the dog. I mean, I think that they're using the alien cover story to keep the money rolling in.
No question about it. That's why many people have said that a laughter curtain was created by the Air Force to associate Area 51 into a popular mythology. And while they are making lots of money, tons of money, I mean, Area 51 generates so much money that it's ridiculous. Yet, the very county that Area 51 belongs to is Lincoln County, one of the poorest counties in Nevada. And Area 51 is located right inside Lincoln County, one of the poorest counties, and all the money, millions and millions of dollars generated from Area 51, they don't go nothing. In fact, to Lincoln County, only the state of Nevada is allowed to tax the military base. Of course, everybody knows that the county cannot tax a military base, but a county can tax private contractors that work there. And there is that big controversy right now that's going on in Lincoln County, Nevada, and bickering between the Lincoln County and the state of Nevada. The state of Nevada is getting lots of money, of course, from the tax of these, of Area 51 base, but the very same county that they are in is not getting anything. There's not enough infrastructure. There's poor farmers and ranchers in Lincoln County, and this is a topic that Las Vegas KLAS TV journalist George Knapp has taken up recently.
Good.
And so, it's a strange thing that nothing is going into the people who need most.
It's terrible. And I think that in the second hour, when we talk about Dulce, we're going to see a similar issue because a lot of these bases are adjacent to or on American Indian reservations. And I'm sure they're not seeing, listen, whatever money is going back into the communities here, I'm sure is a pittance compared to what money could be going there, because all of these projects are classified. It's all black budget, so nobody even really knows how much money is floating around attached to these projects. So how can you tax it when you don't have the numbers to work with in the first place?
Exactly, and that's why I would like to, publicize this kind of injustice, I would say, because...
Agreed.
Yes, and, we're not against black projects and defense contractors. That's their job, but they should be equally distributed, the revenue from tax to the people around there.
Agreed. And this takes me back to in 95, I believe, when the people were wounded at Area 51 because of the toxic material burn-offs. And then Jonathan Turley, a man I admire, took up their case. And didn't the case just end up getting thrown out, and then Clinton signed some kind of presidential determination or something that basically said that this information is of a national security issue? So basically they got nothing out of it, and they were very ill as a result of the toxic burning that occurred there, but no money was given to them.
That's correct initially. However, there has been a grassroots movement by the people to address this issue. And I, for example, in 1998, started the People's Rally at Area 51, right at the perimeter line on Groom Lake Road. And we brought this issue, and we kept this issue alive. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Jonathan Turley has done a great job. And it's because of the people's grassroots movement that some changes have begun to be made. In other words, some of the workers and the families have begun to receive compensation finally 3 or 4 years ago. But there are still many others who haven't received the compensation. And for example, Fred Dunham, he hasn't received anything. He was injured, and he was exposed to actually nuclear radiation, actually from a nuclear experiment that was done underground, but near Area 19.
Yes.
Which is not too far from Area 51, but something went wrong with that nuclear underground explosion. I believe that was in 1970 something.
Okay.
But that radiation started leaking underground through some of the tunnels. And according to Fred Dunham, who was one of the security surrounding Area 51, he was exposed to that, and he still is suffering, but he hasn't got any compensation. And, this is just a tip of the iceberg. So these kind of issues need to be addressed. That's why I believe in exposing all of these things to the public who are absolutely sidetracked by the alien stories that has been generated by our own government, most likely, to detract attention away from the seriousness of these facilities.
Do you think that, and I know that it's been suggested by some people, but do you think that Bob Lazar was given that information to intentionally disperse, to lend more details to the mythology?
I have a tendency to support that view, because Bob Lazar is quite a smart fellow, no question about it. I have seen him about 3 times, in Rachel and the area. In 3 different occasions, but I believe he's a very smart person, and in fact, he is still doing business with defense contractors. And in fact, last year, I was told that he became a consultant for Raytheon in a certain capacity, and he still conducts his United Nuclear business in Michigan, selling items, not only to the public, but also to defense contractors, and also doing some contractual work with some defense contractors. So he is a real person with a deep knowledge of weapon systems. So a person like that, who had said that there were alien spacecraft or things like that before, I have a very hard time believing in that, and my belief is that he may have been wittingly participated in bringing the Area 51 mythology to the public and creating a laughter curtain.
Yes, I listen, I hate to think that's the case, but the older I get and the more I look at this, the more I'm beginning to think that is the case. Let me ask you this. Obviously, much has been made, and we would be remiss not to mention the ideas that there are many layers underground below Area 51 and various other bases. Do you think that there are larger underground areas below Area 51?
Well, I wouldn't doubt that there are levels, many levels of underground areas, and that is common to a lot of military bases now.
Yes.
If you go to any military base, there are usually 2 or 3 levels underground for various projects and various compartments, and it's a common sense to have an underground system. But to say that there are, let's say, 20 to 30 stories underground is just very difficult to believe, and there's no need for that. So I am of the opinion that these stories about underground tunnels and bases connected intercontinentally underground is just a fabrication.
Right. What about state to state?
Well, that's what I mean. It's, we're talking about, let's say, Los Alamos, for example, National
Yes.
Laboratory, north of Albuquerque. It's a huge area. So they are connected underground by some kind of a tunnel where vehicles can go from various technical area to another technical area. So that's just Los Alamos, there may be about 10 miles, 15 miles, but we're talking about some kind of underground tunnels systems connecting California's Edwards to Nevada's Area 51 or even to Colorado or New Mexico. And that kind of a scale is very difficult to realistically imagine. And so, of course, I cannot say that this is false because, in the 1950s, they already had amazing tunnel digging machines. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I am kind of skeptical about this underground connections in the Southwest.
I am too.
But there are underground bases everywhere because that's part of the military structures, philosophy to have underground levels in any military base.
Let me ask you this, Norio, because one of the things that still haunts me about this is when you start looking at the amazing aircraft that were tested and came out of Area 51, the Blackbird, the SR-71, the various stealth craft. I mean, some of those have now been around for a few decades. And we're building these new hangars. Ostensibly, you would think that there's new aircraft being built, but the research that I'm seeing is it still kind of looks like, they're maybe talking about a stealth transport of some type. But what gets me is that the need for the secrecy, since these planes, was it the SR-71 or the A-12? They were talking about being the greatest plane ever created. I don't remember which one, but those were planes that we got a lot of usage out of. And I don't know. I don't see. If you look at the space program, we're still using, propellants, and I'm just not seeing the evolution of an aircraft that seems to merit this level of secrecy. And obviously, we, the public, are not going to see aircraft until quite a while after the thing's been created. But I don't know, man. It just seems like a money black hole to me.
Yes, you're right in that sense, because many of these technologies that have existed since the 60s, or 70s, they still are basically using the same system. Yes. And haven't really changed that much. I mean, they have remodeled it here and there in some capacity, but basically it's still the same kind of technology. But of course, we're now going into unmanned systems, and yes. But of course, the warfares have changed in the past. Many times, for example, these days, we no longer need as much speed and other, capacities as before. And because of the the improvement in satellite technologies and unmanned systems. Mm-hmm. So, the old systems like the SR-71 and other aircraft, they have basically not changed, but they're still useful in some ways. Mm-hmm. But the biggest is the secrecy is, maybe you're right in that it's about spending money. It's about spending money to create things that may not work. And in the meantime, the contractors are making lots of money. Yes. And we're not seeing the results.
That's what bothers me, and that's certainly what I'm taking away from this. I could be dead wrong, and maybe there's something tremendous out there that one day we will see. But here again, I just keep staring at this map, and I see all of these dormitories, and I hear that some days they bring in 1,500 people at a time. So there are a lot of people employed out there. And one point, I guess the late 90s or something, there was the rumor that they were moving Area 51 or that it was becoming obsolete, and maybe there was going to be a new base in Utah or what have you. But obviously that's completely untrue. This thing is flourishing.
It's flourishing, especially in the past few years, because the next door neighbor to Area 51, namely the former Nevada test site,
Yes.
has now been designated as Nevada National Security Site, N2S2, Nevada National Security Site, where they are now conducting weapons testing programs, and some of them are interrelated with Area 51, the neighbor, Area 51. Mm-hmm. So the programs at Area 51 have actually expanded, in a sense, to the neighbor, to the Nevada National Security Site. And to say that Area 51's purpose has finished is just not true. In fact, it's expanding, as you mentioned. You can tell by the number of employees' vehicles parked in the Las Vegas airport, and also other items. Of course, I think last year or a year and a half ago, when the government was having, the financial problems, there was a time for a month and a half where every single Area 51 aircraft that took the workers to the Groom Lake stopped for a month and a half.
Okay.
Because of the financial crisis. And but that now...
That was during the government shutdown?
That's right. Government
okay, gotcha.
Affected Area 51 just as any other base. But now, of course, it's really flourishing again, and with all these new projects. And as I said, we need to see something solid coming from all these this kind of expenditures from our tax money.
Agreed.
But one thing I'm afraid of is that there could be lots of misuse of funds. And are not actually going into practical things, but maybe extravagant spending for only to benefit those companies.
That's right. Well, I read today, and this was, from a reputable aviation writer, and the only figures that I could get were from 2010. And at that point, the Air Force's black budget, just the portion of their budget that was black budget, already exceeded $15 billion, and that was 2010. So God knows what it is in 2014. And that's only the black portion of the budget. And, listen, the conspiracy theorists will say that, a lot of the black budget money comes from various bad deals that we do across the planet. Who knows? But I know a lot of that money comes from the American taxpayer. And that's what bothers me. It's just this is money without oversight, and it's providing a good life for some folks. And I don't begrudge anybody a job. So, to the people that are working there, I totally get it. But like yourself, I would like to see some oversight, and I would like to see some kind of worthwhile results coming out of these things besides very expensive war machines, which we then have to create wars for so that we can actually have them serve a purpose.
Exactly. I am in agreement with you in this regard.
So I don't know. I got on a rant there for a minute. But the other thing is, at one point, I believe they had to, and you were talking about the nuclear testing that they were doing out there. I mean, the other thing is, it's not really a safe place to work. You were mentioning the gentleman that that has the poisoning. At one point, I mean, when they were doing all of the nuclear bomb tests out there, I think they ended up having to remove a lot of the topsoil around the base at one point.
Yes, that's right. That's true, and so it's not a safe place to work. No question about it. Even the surrounding town of Rachel has radiation, meters to count the radiation. So we're talking about something that has affected people. In fact,
Yes.
because the Nevada test site had conducted so many nuclear tests in the 50s and 60s, and some of the people who are affected live in Utah and other states, and they have not been compensated, even though they were affected by the radiation. So there are organizations that address these issues. So it's very important to have, black projects, for our defense, but the misuse and also the environmental effect is very important.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Area 51 researcher. He calls himself the unorthodox ufologist, which I think is a very humble title. We're speaking with Norio Hayakawa. We're going to take a break in a moment. In the second hour, we're going to talk about the Dulce Base and other potential underground bases and his home state of New Mexico, because I've got some questions about other related, and not Roswell, you guys, because I know you've heard that one beat to death, but we have some questions about some other possible UFO crashes and stories from the great state of New Mexico. And we're going to also talk about this alleged base at Dulce. There has been much said about this, and I have been one who has been a bit on the fence about this, but Norio is going to set us straight on what we know currently about Dulce. So,
I'm glad you mentioned the second topic, which is dulce. Actually, dulce is a Spanish word that means sweet, but actually this location, Dulce, New Mexico, used to be known as Agua Dulce, which means sweet water in Spanish.
Ah, okay.
And so actually the pronunciation is not dolce, but dulce, which means sweet.
Dulce.
And
okay.
Actually, in California, there's a location called Agua Dulce right near Los Angeles, north of Los Angeles, towards Antelope Valley. But Agua Dulce used to be a small community inhabited by the descendants of the Spanish conquistadores who came to New Mexico in the 1500s. And the descendants of those Spanish people became ranchers, and until the 1900s, it was occupied by these Hispano people. But the United States government created, suddenly, in the early 1900s, an Indian reservation over there and brought all kinds of Apache tribes from various areas and created the Jicarilla Apache Nation. And that's where Dulce is right now.
So, Norio, you're saying that the Apaches were not indigenous to that area. They were shipped in.
That's correct. That's absolutely.
Wow. I did not know that. Okay, you guys, I think I'm hearing the music. We're going to take a quick break. My name is Michael Parker. You are listening to The Electric Pyramid. We're speaking with Norio Hayakawa. We are going to take a break, and we will be back shortly with our second hour. Please stay tuned. Greetings, truth seekers. Welcome to Hour 2 of the Electric Pyramid, where we are being joined tonight by Norio Hayakawa, and we were talking about Area 51 in the first hour, and in the second hour, we're going to be talking about the Dulce Base. Norio, before we left, you were explaining to me that Dulce and the people that were indigenous to it were not the Native Americans who we now have a reservation dedicated to there.
That's right. That's absolutely correct.
That's critical, I think, then.
It's very, well, this whole Jicarilla Apache Reservation is a huge reservation in area. One of the largest areas of New Mexico is occupied by the Jicarilla Apache Reservation, the Jicarilla Apache Nation, which is a mixture of various Apache groups from New Mexico and elsewhere. And they call themselves, Jicarilla, which means a basket, a small basket weaving like a basket. But anyway, however, there are still some original Hispano people that are still living and allowed to live inside Dulce. And one of the examples is the whole Gomez family, who are not Apache people. They are Hispano people, descendants of the Spanish, conquistadores who came here in 1500s. And those people are excelled in ranching, cattle raising and so on. So they still live there. But what happened in Dulce area is something that most people have no idea. In other words, in 1967, on December 10th, the Atomic Energy Commission detonated a nuclear device underground about 22 miles southwest of Dulce, right next to the reservation in a clearing area of Carson National Forest, right next to the reservation. And that was called Project GasBuggy. It had a good intention of initially trying to soften the hard rocks and try to loosen the flow of natural gas.
Okay.
But the government was well aware that doing such things could eventually cause radiation leakage, which happened. So in the mid-1970s, radiation started leaking in the surrounding areas, including Dulce, and began to affect a large number of animals and humans. And this is something that they don't want to talk about too much these days. But if you go to Dulce, there are a lot of people who have been suffering from various types of cancer, and infertility rate is very high among the women there. The population used to be much larger, but now it's only about 2,800. But this experiment, nuclear experiment conducted by the Atomic Energy Commission, or Department of Energy of today, did produce this strange and dangerous effect in the environment. And it's my opinion that the government began to research on the effect of radiation, and they wanted to monitor the area, and by selecting certain kinds of animals such as cattle that native to that area, and selecting a few types of cows from each ranch, and conducting some kind of a test. And according to the late Gabe Valdez, who was assigned by the state of New Mexico to investigate those strange cattle mutilations that started in the mid-1970s and lasted to the early 1990s, Gabe Valdez came to the conclusion that this cattle mutilation was not caused by the aliens, but may have been caused by our own government.
Right.
To monitor the radiation levels. And so a lot of people don't know about this, but I believe that the government had created some kind of an alien scenario to detract attention and bring the so-called laughter curtain, so that the public in general will associate cattle mutilations with alien abductions and alien intervention.
Understood. Let me read between the lines. Let me ask you, is it possible then that this nuclear test, they knew that it would result in the leakage of this radiation, and it was not really for the perforation of gas areas at all, but really they probably knew this was going to be the result, and that was the plan all along?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but there have been some benefits of that, yes. In that area around Dulce and south of Dulce, there are many natural gas pumping areas.
Yeah.
So natural gas is now abundant in that area, but the byproduct of it has been covered up, namely the leakage of radiation. And the government decided the best way is to not make any announcement saying that they have made a mistake and that they wanted to buy 100 cows to test it. They never did that. Instead, they did something by hiding these facts, and they did secretly began to monitor. And so Gabe Valdez, the New Mexico State Patrol officer, told me that he was convinced that the groups like the Sandia Laboratories in Albuquerque created some kind of a remotely controlled platforms in the 1970s and tested them in the Dulce area, and used some kind of remotely controlled platforms to, or even some kind of helicopters to pick the certain cows that they marked beforehand, a few days beforehand, with some kind of phosphorescent light around the legs of the particular cow. And they picked up those cows, and after they tested at a remote location near Dulce, they dropped it off at the same ranch, the same location that they picked it up, and as if they dropped the cows from the air.
Right.
Actually, they did, according to Gabe Valdez. By the way, Gabe Valdez's son, Greg Valdez, wrote an excellent book called Dulce Base, and he will be speaking at the New Mexico UFO conference on October 4th. But, this is a fascinating topic. It's a fascinating topic going back with the same idea as Area 51. In other words, America's black budget and all these programs may be okay, but the biggest danger is how to dispose of a toxic substance and waste materials. That's the biggest headaches of defense contractors.
Understood.
And,
so you're saying that they thought that if they were to purchase the cattle and test them, then they're automatically perhaps admitting culpability in this toxic leak. So they instead devised this very potentially expensive workaround with the alien scenario.
Covertly doing these operations and then also creating a cover story.
Yeah.
And that's why some of these potential technologies that were developing at that time, namely such as the some type of UAVs, remotely controlled platforms, or even some kind of holographic projection devices, may have been used to create incidents of UFOs in the Dulce area. But that's just one explanation. There are other explanations potentially for that. One thing for sure is that the Dulce area is still, filled with some strange things. There is also a strange private ranch north of Dulce, right next to the Colorado state line, and it's called the Redding Ranch, but it was used most likely by the CIA as some kind of a small-scale off-site aircraft test facility, and also probably some kind of a biological lab using parts of the cows to test chemicals and biological items such as anthrax for some kind of experiment, biological warfare experiment. And it may not have been some kind of a huge facility, but maybe a small off-site facility using this ranch called the Redding Ranch. The Redding Ranch changed owners many times from one owner to another group, and now it's under the hands of the Ute tribe of Colorado. And so nobody can go into this ranch. And it was said that Robert Bigelow, the multi-billionaire businessman in Las Vegas, actually claimed that his organization, the National Discovery Sciences Institute, had visited that ranch and examined the ranch and came out with the conclusion that it was just a regular ranch. There was nothing going on. And it was far from the truth, because I have testimonies from the Gomez family that that ranch is still filled with secret activity. There are many guard towers that doesn't look like hunting towers. It looks more like guard towers.
Those are the most heavily fortified hunting towers ever. If those are deer blinds, I'm a monkey's uncle. That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. That's why it's still unresolved. Greg Valdez will tell the people that Redding Ranch could be a culprit because it's located right at the foothills of Archuleta Mountain, which is different from Archuleta Mesa. See, most people think that Archuleta Mesa, the one that you can see from Dulce, is the place where the underground facility exists, but that's not true. Archuleta Mesa or the peak has nothing to do with the alleged Dulce Base. It's the Archuleta Mountain or the Mount Archuleta, which is located northwest of the mesa, and you cannot see the mountain from the Dulce because it's high over there in the, you know, you have to climb the mesa to see the Archuleta Mountain. But anyway, it's right next to Colorado, and that's where a suspicious ranch still exists, and nobody dare go inside that ranch. As I said, there's a fortified guard towers, and who knows what will happen if you start going inside.
Norio, let me ask you, so this is the Redding Ranch that we're speaking of?
The Redding Ranch. It's still unresolved.
And it's owned by the Ute people?
That Ute people or the Ute tribe. But the ownership of the land changed many times from the government to Bureau of Indian Affairs to other organizations, and changed back and forth. And so that is one of the tactics of groups like CIA,
right,
which keeps changing ownership to hide their activity.
Agreed. So my question is, so this Ute tribe or this Ute people that's currently listed as the owners, are they a real group of people? I mean, does anyone ever speak to these people? Do they have a spokesperson?
They have a spokesperson, and they probably have like a administration, but it's very difficult to get in touch with or talk to these people because they are also very secretive. More secretive than the Hickory Apache people in Dulce. And so I'm not saying that the Redding Ranch is the Dulce Base, but there's still a lot of questions that we're still searching. But the idea of a humongous underground U.S. alien joint facility is just a fabricated story, possibly created by the Air Force of Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque in the late 1970s.
Well, in this particular case, I guess I've got two questions, because A, what is really there or not there? And B, if I'm reading into this correctly, I don't want to be too conspiratorial, but I'm left with no choice. It almost sounds like, well, let me just get back to this Indian thing, because this Native American thing is bothering me. It almost sounds like these are just complete fronts. Are there any actual Native Americans on these plots of land? Because it just sounds like it was very convenient for them to appoint these parcels of land to these indigenous, well, they're not even indigenous, but these Native American groups, and yet they're very shadowy and hard to get a hold of. I don't know, this doesn't sound on the up and up to me.
Well, this whole thing about the Native American culture is part of the whole thing that the government had been aware of. The whole Native American culture is filled with different kinds of spiritual beliefs.
Yes.
Including the belief that their ancestors had actually come from underground. In fact, right. The Hopis and other Indian tribes in the Southwest, they have this tradition, and they also have this belief that in the nature there are entities such as skinwalkers and
yes.
other entities. Even the legend of Bigfoot is part of I would say part of the religious and cultural belief of Native Americans. So the government has been clever to conduct certain things in these areas because it will give them a good, cover story or association with the mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And so New Mexico in particular is filled with these areas, and that's why it's a convenient location for the government to conduct any kind of a experiment, whether it's a psychological warfare experiment or any kind of experiment. And so, that's what I'm saying.
I get it. Okay, so let me ask you this. The follow-up was you mentioned that this was potentially something that emanated originally from Kirtland. So I'm not quite following you here. So what are you saying is or is not there at Dulce?
Well, first of all, there is not a single credible, documentary, physical, tangible evidence whatsoever that there's a huge underground U.S. joint alien facility underneath Archuleta Mesa, as has been propagated by a lot of people in the past 30 to 40 years. But it will make a tremendous science fiction story, but the reality is that this kind of alien joint facility doesn't exist, but it's just a cover story for possible small-scale off-site aircraft test facility and also biowarfare testing facility near Dulce, New Mexico. That's more realistic and more likely because of, as I said, proximity to America's top biogenetic programs at Los Alamos, which is only 65 miles away from Dulce. And then also, the Sandia National Laboratory in Albuquerque inside Kirtland Air Force Base, where there's a big program about biowarfare, experiments and other experiments. So, the proximity of this area to the General Los Alamos Laboratories and the Albuquerque's Kirtland Air Force Base creates a circle of disinformation and information mixed, and also manipulation of information to create cover stories, to create some stories so that most people will associate Dulce with alien activity. That's what I've been saying. And, New Mexico is a very interesting state, and this relates to the arrival of German scientists and engineers that came in 1945, immediately after World War II, to Albuquerque's Kirtland Army Air Base.
Yeah.
And they had a big role in America's Black Project programs, and many of them were sent to White Sands area, and some of them were sent to Los Alamos Laboratories area and worked in secret programs. So it's filled with this kind of a thing, the America's most advanced directed energy weapon systems are right now being tested at, White Sands missile ranges in, New Mexico. And so New Mexico has a tremendous history of this. And I would say that the influx of German technology and scientists in 1945, right after World War II, had a tremendous impact on black budget programs and military research and testing in New Mexico. So, look at Holloman Air Force Base.
Yes.
That has a tremendous connection with the German Air Force Base. German Air Force, by the way, yeah. And so it's a fascinating state that can do a lot of different things without the public knowing about it. And one example I like to mention while we're on this subject is that most people have no idea that in Albuquerque there was almost a catastrophic nuclear accident in 1957.
Really?
That's right. The U.S. Air Force plane accidentally dropped a hydrogen bomb on May 22nd, 1957, right inside Kirtland Air Force Base as they were landing in the base from Texas. But fortunately, the mechanism to actually create a nuclear explosion wasn't attached to this thing. And however, the huge hydrogen bomb itself exploded, causing a large crater, which was about 4 miles south of the control tower of Kirtland Air Force Base. And this happened in 1957, and nobody found out about it except the LA Times and the Albuquerque Tribune through the Freedom of Information Act in 1986. So in 1986, for the first time, the people in Albuquerque learned that there was almost a nuclear catastrophe in 1957. What happened was that the Air Force came in big force with many people and cleaned up completely the whole crater, and nothing was left behind. They picked up the whole bomb and they cleaned up completely, just like they did in Roswell. You know,
supposedly, yes.
I'm not saying that the Roswell was the broken arrow incident, just like this, but they cleaned it up completely. So until the LA Times came up with the article in 1986, nobody knew about this, and they were shocked about it. But it's a miracle that this didn't turn into a catastrophe. But things like this, make New Mexico very, in one way, it's dangerous. It's a beautiful state, but it's huge, humongous state, and there's plenty of space for any kind of a test that can be conducted by defense contractors and the government.
Well, you mentioned, I was listening to some interviews you were doing with other shows. You mentioned another event in Farmington, I believe, in the 50s, which I was not familiar with.
That's right. The Farmington incident was one of the most fascinating incidents that took place for 3 days in a row during lunchtime on March 15th and 16th and 17th of 1950. And hundreds and hundreds of residents of Farmington, at that time, a city of about 7,000 people, witnessed hundreds of silver disc-shaped objects maneuvering in the sky over their town. And this happened from 11 a.m. to 12 o'clock every day for 3 days in a row. And you're not talking about, 100 objects, but we're talking about 300 to 400 to up to 500 objects were counted by the eyewitnesses. And what happened was that people were surprised, and after this incident, Washington, D.C. sent many agents to Farmington to explain to the people what happened. And basically, they used this scare tactic about the Cold War and so on. 1950 was in the height of the Cold War.
Yes. And
most people were very cooperative to government agents, telling them not to discuss about this sighting because it's a part of a very important national, agenda and so on. And so today we have very little, in fact, hardly any photos of these objects. Moreover, in 1950, nobody was carrying cameras and walking in the streets or cell phones. So it's very difficult to find photos. But recently, a black and white photo that depict about 6 or 7 round disc-shaped objects have been recovered through the efforts of people like Alejandro Rojas. Plus, there are many witnesses to this Farmington incident of 1950. If you go to Farmington, to the Senior Center, which I have done about 6 years ago when I visited Farmington, I talked to a person that exactly described a sighting just as it was reported in the Farmington Daily Times of March 18th of 1950. In other words, finally, on the 3rd day of this incident, the Farmington Daily Times, the main newspaper over there, had a 1-inch thick headline stating saucer armada invades Farmington.
Wow.
And then it was 1-inch headline, and with detailed description by many residents that they had seen these silver metallic objects maneuvering over the city, and one particular object only one was reddish color, but it seemed like that was the one that was leading this aerial maneuver.
So they looked like actual hardware. They didn't look like lights. They looked like metallic discs.
That's right, hardware. Wow. And when you talk about the mass sightings of, for example, 1997 in Phoenix, that's nothing compared to this historic, unbelievable, but real incident that took place for 3 days in a row.
At high noon.
In high noon in Farmington. And nobody knows about it now, but because people forgot about it. And but although it was also reported in the LA Times, I have a copy of the LA Times article of 1950 that described this thing also. But by and large, this incident has been forgotten. Most people into UFOs today don't know about this incident, but this is a very important incident. Now, what those things were is still unsolved. Mm-hmm. That's a real mystery. But the fact that the governmental agents came over and probably told them to hand photos if somebody had taken photos, or they also, I understand that they bought out a lot of newspapers. And so today it's very difficult to find the original newspaper, although there are few. I think there are just maybe 100 or so original newspaper. One is in the library in Farmington, and then Aztec nearby. The library has a original copy, and I have also a copy of the headline news. So we still don't know what those things are, and I have to admit that that's one incident that really mystifies me, even though I am skeptical about the physical alien visitations. At least this incident needs to be checked.
It's a remarkable story. And that brings me to something I wanted to ask you kind of on a more philosophical basis, because I tend to kind of reside with you. And I've heard you say on radio shows that, you are very passionate about this subject, as am I. And yet the older I get, the more skeptical I come on a case-by-case basis, which I think to some people would seem like a conundrum, but I don't even know how to phrase this exactly. It's because some people might say, well, Michael, if you're skeptical, then why are you even so interested if you're constantly, trying to find conventional answers to this? But yet I think that you and I kind of share some common ground here. It's still a subject that imbues a sense of awe and inspiration to me. And if there's even a small chance that some of this is true, that it's worth pursuing, and even if it's all man-made, that's worth pursuing as well. I guess I'm kind of talking out of my head, but when I listen to you, I hear the skepticism, but I also still hear the passion for pursuing the subject.
Exactly. That's why, even though I tend to be skeptical about physical alien visitations in physical alien spacecraft, I believe that we're living in a world that is still filled with mysteries. And so I always say that the physical reality may not be the only reality that exists here. That's my philosophy. Let's take, for example, another incident in New Mexico, the famous Socorro, New Mexico incident of 1964, witnessed by Patrolman Lonnie Zamora. Mm-hmm. He actually saw this oval-shaped object with a tripod, that landed in the desert outside of Socorro on April 24th, 1964, as he was chasing a high-speeding car outside Socorro. But after he heard an explosion in the desert, he stopped chasing the high-speeding car and went to the desert, and lo and behold, in the distance, about 350 feet, away from him, there was this shiny oval-shaped object with an insignia that apparently was landed there a few minutes when he got there, but with a tripod. And the interesting thing about it is that he claimed he saw two entities that looked normal. He never described them as aliens or anything. He said they looked normal, except that they were smaller, but they were wearing white coveralls, and they were touching the object. And as soon as these two entities realized that they were being observed, they went inside this craft and they took off. And what's interesting is the fact that Lonnie Zamora never described these two entities as aliens. He
Right.
described them as normal looking. And so it's an interesting incident that took place on April 24, 1964. And I believe that Lonnie Zamora saw exactly what he saw. I
Yes.
even talked to him when I moved to New Mexico on the telephone, and I believe him. He's a very gentleman and a very polite and a very nice gentleman and highly credible. In fact, this incident was thoroughly investigated immediately after the incident by J. Allen Hynek
Yes.
and other folks from the assigned by the Air Force. There were about 30 investigators associated with J. Allen Hynek that came to Socorro and thoroughly investigated the ground and investigated the testimonies and other patrol officers as well.
There was physical trace evidence on the ground, was there? I mean, weren't there tripod marks or something?
Yes, there are tripod marks plus burning part of the burnt branches of trees and shrubs.
Yeah.
So this is an authentic incident, and contrary to some crazy rumors that came about a few years ago that this was done by some college students of New Mexico Institute of Technology nearby, that they did this hoax. It's not. That itself is a hoax.
Right.
And so I believe that this was an authentic incident. The very question is, what did Lonnie Zamora see? Did he see alien spacecraft, or did he see something from our government? So it's an interesting thing. As I said, it's filled. The New Mexico is filled with this kind of incidents.
Absolutely. Let's take it a little bit to the east, because I'm from Texas. Did you ever look into the Stephenville case of 2008 at all?
Oh, yes, I heard about it. I read about it. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know if you'd done, I was just curious if you had looked into it much or.
No, I didn't look into much of it, but I heard about it. I read a few things about it. But this whole idea of New Mexico is just fascinates me. And as
Absolutely.
I tell many people, and I will tell in the conference coming up in October 4th, that New Mexico is not only about the Roswell incident, when it comes to UFOs. Roswell is only just a minor part of the entire amazing history of UFO sightings in New Mexico. I mean, take, for example, there's a town called San Antonio, New Mexico, which is south of Socorro. And in August of 1945, a couple or three people witnessed something crashing over there outside that town. This happened in 1945 already, after World War II. And then there's one crash that took place on July 3rd of 1947 in the plains of San Agustin, which is near Magdalena, which is right near the very large array, the VLA antennas that became famous in the movie Contact.
Yes.
But anyway, this whole interesting area is the location of alleged crash of a strange object in 1947. And then, of course, in 1948, there was an alleged crash of something outside the town of Aztec, which is about an hour's away drive from Farmington. And contrary to what many ufologists think, this was not necessarily a hoax, because I have actually talked with some Dulce residents that claimed that they had seen some object flying in 1948 towards Aztec. And so there must have been something that took place, Aztec. But all of these incidents, the big question is, are we talking about alien craft crashing, or are we talking about some kind of a governmental experiment that's gone awry,
Right.
So that's the big question. As I said, Michael, the Germans and the U.S. military were cooperating in rocketry south of White Sands missile ranges already after World War II in 1945, 46, 47. Not only rocketry, but other types of interesting aircraft. For example, the U.S. military, I believe, acquired some kind of a prototype flying wing aircraft from Germany, and other aircraft as well. Not only flying aircraft, the flying wings, but other prototypes of some other things. So it's very possible that something caused some accidents were caused during these kind of experiments. Because personally, I have a very hard time believing that anything that's physical coming from outer space, traveling millions of miles, coming here, just crashing. It's impossible to fathom.
It is. That is the jump in logic that I have never been able to make, and that's what I've always been confused about. If you can traverse interstellar space, yet you can't manage a thunderstorm, it just makes no sense. But let me throw another wrinkle into all of this regarding New Mexico. New Mexico as a state, I didn't realize until last year. I went out to Marfa to look at the Marfa lights and for a show, and I started learning about the geology of West Texas and New Mexico. New Mexico is known as the volcano state. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yes, there is a lot of volcanoes. In fact, yes. The town of Albuquerque is, there's a lot of volcanoes on the west side of Albuquerque. And then also surrounding Los Alamos, there are lots of volcanoes. So it's a volcanic state, no question about it.
And I'm just throwing it out there. This is pure speculation, but there's so many things about New Mexico that make it this mysterious, unusual place. And listen, if we put the ET UFO thing back on the table for a moment, perhaps in some way it is possibly related to geologic areas where they can get energy. I don't know. The more I find out about New Mexico, the more interesting it becomes. And then, yes, you throw in Paperclip, you throw in the German scientists, because I used to take a dim view of the possible explanation for Roswell being, some kind of a German craft with some people on it or whatever. But the older I get, the more open-minded I am to that idea. I guess everything's on the table at this point. I mean, so many things are possible, and it's all open to. I just want to know what the truth is, because I don't.
It's all open to speculation, and these are, I would say, very possible speculations that we're talking about. As you said, New Mexico is a very diverse state with diverse climate, and geologically it's very interesting. Many of the volcanoes, of course, are not active,
right?
But there could be some kind of a thing that attracts other things, who knows?
There could be geothermal or geoelectric energy still percolating underground. Certainly, I think that's what's going on in Marfa with the plasma coming up out of the ground. So it's just, man, there's so many things about New Mexico that just make it a wondrous place.
Yes, there's definitely. And this is the reason why the Sandia laboratories and the Air Force Research Laboratories, which are located inside Kirtland Air Force Base, they have been in the front line of these studies, and that's why when people talk about the the low humming hums that people have reported in Taos areas and so on, other areas, as recently as a few years ago, and probably even now in some places in northern New Mexico. It's possible that the Sandia Laboratories, national laboratories, may have been also involved in research or even testing of these things. So who knows, that's why I always say that when you call the Sandia Laboratories, national laboratories, to explain certain things that are mysterious, maybe we should also look into the Sandia National Laboratories themselves.
Without a doubt.
That's right.
Yeah, without a doubt. That the hum, I mean, that is a very strange thing. And it almost seems like it would make more sense that it was some form of man-made testing of some sort.
Exactly, and that's why that makes everything so interesting. And that's why I continued to investigate things and try as much as possible to go on site to the location. So that's why even today I visit Dulce a few times, at least a year. It's only about 3 hours drive from my home here in Rio Rancho. So I keep in touch with the people in Dulce that give me reports from time to time. And the reports of military the helicopters still happen occasionally, even today, you know, even nowadays. So it's unending. We don't know what really is going on, but something may be going on, has been going on all these years. And so I am excited to be living in this center of action, as I call.
Well, let me ask you this, because I know that we're running out of time, and I've been wanting to ask you this all night, because we were talking about platforms and we were talking about Area 51. I just wanted to get your take on the gosh, now I'm forgetting the name, but the flying triangle, the TR-3B or the TR-3A. Do you think that those exist as some form of man-made? I mean, because listen, I've never seen one of the triangles, so I can't even say for sure that they exist. People are obviously photographing something, but do you think the TR-3P, the way we conceive it as a flying triangle, exists?
Well, actually, TR-3A is the actual more realistic version.
Yes.
But the TR-3B is basically a creation, a story that was created by Fouché.
Yeah.
And TR-3A is more credible than TR-3B. Now, the biggest thing about all of this is that, to me, it's impossible to have such a gigantic triangular-shaped object that people report seeing unless the image is somehow maximized by some kind of a holographic image maximization technology or something like that. And this is why things like this may have happened in Phoenix, Arizona in 1997. It may have been possibly an experiment in psychological warfare coming from Area 51. And the actual size of the aircraft, the humongous mile-long aircraft, the triangular aircraft, is physically impossible by any kind of a propulsion system unless it's a smaller size. And that's why I have always had the belief that the United States have had and is developing even now a technology to maximize the image observed by the observer from below of a craft that's actually 3 or 4 times larger than what actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And,
or maybe it's not even there at all, and it's the holograph, and that explains the silence.
That's exactly what I've been telling people about. And because physically, a mile long or 3 times the football field size object floating or just making no sound is physically impossible to conjure, you know. And
given our what we think we know about physics and avionics at this point.
Exactly, unless it was staged on purpose for deception, some kind of a PSYOPs program. But we're living in some amazing technological age, so anything is possible.
And Norio, also, are you now in charge of the Area 51 Facebook page as well?
That's correct. I was assigned as a public information director of the Facebook's largest Area 51 site. And it's conducted by an individual in Los Angeles, but he assigned me as the public information director, so I will post, and I have been posting some interesting items on that page.
Yes, it's just facebook.com/area51.us.
That's
so
correct.
Check that out, because I've been on it the last couple of days, and Norio's put some really good stuff on there. And anything else you wanted to bring up to the listeners, Norio?
No, all I can say, Mike, is that it was such a great honor and pleasure for me to appear on your show tonight. And I have said a lot of things that I want to say tonight, and you made it possible.